We've got about 80% of our children now have a diagnosis of autism. All of our children have speech, language, communication needs, and many of them have severe learning difficulties. We've got 101 children on site at the moment, and when COVID hit us all, we had 101 children, both here on our site here, and we also had a DSP across the other side of the city as well. So we had to look at how we were managing the situation on 2 different sites at the time. We've got families from all across the city, so lots of different families, lots of different cultures and religions represented in our school. Every child at Oaklands has a EHCP, and obviously, as they all have special needs, they were all eligible to stay in school during the lockdown. So that was something that we had to work hard on to make sure that we got the right children in school with us then. We've now got 85 staff, and our classes are staffed very highly. We've got high staff ratios. In most of our classes, we've got 8 children. One of our children with our more complex learners has got 6 children in it. Some of our more able pupils are able to work in bigger classes, so they've got 10 pupils. And most of the classes have got 5 members of staff. So they've got 1 teacher, and they will have 1 TA3, TA level 3, and other TA2s. And during COVID-19, obviously, we've had to work hard to make sure we're looking after our staff team. And I think during the presentation this morning, we'd like to talk to you a bit about what we've been doing here during COVID-19 as well, because obviously things are very different this year in terms of what we're doing and how we're approaching our curriculum and our specific children's needs at this particular point in time too. So our journey, as I say, I've been working here actually for a very long time. First of all as a part-time classroom teacher, and then deputy head, and in 2018 took over the headship. At the same time, Ingrid came on board, and we've got 2 assistant heads who work as part of our senior leadership team as well. And in January 2018, we then had Ofsted. So that was a quick learning curve for all of us, I think, to get to know our team and our priorities very quickly as a leadership team. But it really did galvanise the whole staff team, I think, having Ofsted that quickly for us. And shortly after that, we'd been working for 3 years on our NAS accreditation. So in May of 2018, we had put ourselves forward for the accreditation, and we'd done a huge piece of work on that. The National Autistic Society accreditation has really helped to drive school improvement, and it really is embedded within our school now in all our processes and all our documentation. And it really does provide some clear criteria for supporting our autistic learners. So consultation plays a key role, not just with pupils, but with the families that we work with as well, and with other professionals. Understanding the autistic person in terms of their communication and their social understanding is really important to us. Working to really understand our children's sensory experience and how they experience the world around them. Positive behaviour support is a huge area in terms of NAS accreditation, and making sure we're supporting each child appropriately and well-being, and encouraging independence and problem solving. They're all key areas of that accreditation, and so they've all been the things that we've been focused on since we've been on board with the NAS accreditation. They've all become really fundamental for our curriculum and the provision here at Oaklands. We use the standards within that accreditation to really ask questions of ourselves. So for example, in our leadership meeting last night, one of the questions was about sensory profiles that's asked in the NAS accreditation. So it really helps us to reflect at all points on our practice and are we getting it right for our autistic learners. Throughout our presentation this morning, we'll also be talking about the use of technology to support our autistic learners and the families and other professionals as well. First and foremost, obviously technology is a really important voice for some of our children. Many of our children, a large percentage, are pre-verbal, and so we use technology as a means for them to communicate, but also we use technology to inspire learning as well, their wider academic learning, and make links. So many years ago, we do lots of work with our LCI team, our Learning, Communication and Interaction team. And we were talking about how to support specific children. And the LCI team recommended that we try some movie modelling. And so we would use it on an iPad just for one child when they were doing their teach work, their workstation work. And it might be just something as simple as a child showing 1 on their finger. So I would record myself showing 1. This is 1, and the child would actually watch that on the iPad, and then it would inspire them to show 1 on their finger as well. And we could see very quickly that the power of the screen and an iPad was very important for our children, and it doesn't negate what we're doing in the classroom. The class teacher is obviously incredibly important, but one of the things we know about our children is that we need to motivate them to learn, and using a screen, an iPad or an interactive whiteboard or other types of technology has been really important and really powerful for our children. One of the other things that we've been doing is using all different types of social media to make links with other professionals and to try to build an understanding, awareness and acceptance of autism in the wider community. Myself, I have been pretty social media averse in the past, and I was encouraged to try and use Twitter, and very quickly found that it was something that I enjoyed using, but we could speak to a lot more people through using social media. So we used Twitter to send out a Okies tip of the week every weekend, which we hope we can share our top tips from the work that we do here at Oaklands, or we might share some research that we found is really important for our work as well. And we know that we get responses from parents, from other professionals, and from autistic young people and adults themselves as well, who then link up with us. So social media is something that we're evolving, and we've taken one step further during the lockdown period as well more recently. Sally's going to talk to you a bit more about our unique ethos, but that's something that is really important now to us and embedded within our school. And it's really about the whole school understanding the needs of our autistic learners based on how they experience the world around them. We hope that we're forever evolving what we're doing, but we're also looking to, as I say, link with more people, both locally and nationally. So one of the things we did in the last year was link up with the Leicestershire Autistic Society as well. And we've had some fantastic coffee mornings where we've had lots and lots of parents from our school coming, but linking with the Leicestershire Autistic Society as well. We've also been able to get other parents coming into school from other schools, from mainstream schools and from other special schools, who we can introduce to different people from different services, or we can give them some advice about what we're doing here at Oaklands as well. So there's lots of links we've been making that really have helped to build understanding of autism, not just within our own school setting for our own families, but further afield as well. And so lots of the work that we've been doing, particularly stemming from that work with the National Autistic Society, had a really inclusive culture, which included setting up a DSP in the city last year as well. And more recently, the local authority has started to see us as a hub for best practice for autistic children, which has been brilliant. And we recently gained a IQM, Inclusion Quality Mark Centre of Excellence Award, and this has also led to more networking nationally too, which has been brilliant. So as we've become more outward facing, we've visited more schools too, and other schools and settings for children or young people with autism have come to visit us to gain some insights into what we're doing here, which has been brilliant. That sharing both ways. And so because of the fantastic provision here now, we're really pleased that the local authority has seen what we're doing and really values our work, and they've seen fit for us to expand our provision here so that we will be getting more classrooms in the summer of 2022, which is really exciting for us, so that we can extend the provision that we've got for autistic learners in Leicester, which will be brilliant. So our school structure, we have got a senior leadership team that have specific roles and responsibilities. Ingrid's going to talk to you a bit more about the quality of learning and teaching and our CPD. Vicky, who's not with us this morning, will be talking she oversees the outcomes and our outreach work. So if anybody with us this morning, once the pandemic is over, hopefully soon, we will be able to support anybody who wants to come in and have a look at what we're doing. We do a lot of work with other schools, making sure that we can give them a bespoke offer so people can come in and see specific aspects of our work. And Sally is our other assistant head teacher, and she focuses on well-being and positive behaviour support. Then we've got 3 pathway leads. They're our middle leadership team. We've got 5 classes in our Willow pathway. So we've got a Willow pathway lead, and they're our children who might be the youngest children, or the children who we really need to focus on developing communication, interaction skills and behaviours for learning. Then our next pathway is the Cherry pathway, and our more able pathway is called Chestnut pathway. We've got 3 classes in our Chestnut pathway. We've got 12 classes altogether, so 12 class teachers, and then, as I say, we've got class teams where we're trying to develop everybody's expertise. So we have expertise at every level. We've got TA2s who lead courses for us, like the National Autistic Society Early Bird Plus course, and we've got a range of expertise within the team at all levels. And some of the things that we're doing differently due to COVID-19, you'll see here, we've really expanded our social media presence to YouTube and Facebook as well as Twitter. And that's been huge for us during lockdown. There's lots on our website if you wanted to look afterwards at some of the videos that we've been using for our children and families. And they've been really successful in helping families during lockdown. And then we've obviously had to review what we're doing in terms of our risk assessments and ensuring the well-being of our children and our staff. And then there's some ideas of what we've been doing in terms of well-being for our staff team as well. But I'm not going to carry on talking now because I'm aware of the time. So I'm going to pass on to Sally, who's going to talk to you about positive behaviour support now. And I will come back to you at the end of the session. And if you've got questions about the school itself, then I'm happy to answer some questions at the end. Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm here to talk to you about our ethos and our unique approach. So as you can see on this slide, our unique approach is understanding, nurture, interaction and communication, quality, us, and engagement. So as a team, as an SLT, we thought about our school and what we offer and what we're all about. And this is where our unique approach came from. We obviously then worked with our teachers and our TAs as well to really look at each area. So for our understanding, if you just have a look there, we are, as Sarah said, an autism specialist school, and we work with every child to develop their full potential. And also the community. So it's not just about our children and their families, but it's about the community and their understanding of autism as well. Nurture. So every member of Oaklands School is nurtured to develop their talents and interests. They have lots of different talents, lots of different interests, and it's really important that we work with families, with the children and with staff to really draw out those talents. Interaction and communication, real key there. Our communication and interaction with the children all day, every day. It happens in every single lesson, in every single part of the day. And it's really looking at making sure that they can express themselves, their character, and that they're valued as well. Quality. So we strive to excel in every area of school life and in our work in the community as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Us, Oaklands is a family, and when people come to visit our school, that's often what they say. There's that real family atmosphere. And it's really important for us, and it's important for our families to feel that their children are being cared for in that way. It's a home from home. But we're really nurturing them, and we're really, we have high expectations of their learning as well. E is engagement. All learners are engaged and challenged through a curriculum that meets their needs and prepares them for the world. So let's have a little look. So as I said, understanding was first, and understanding is at the heart of what we do. So we focus on the spell approach, and some of you may already know a little bit about this. So we have structure is our S. So it's really, really important that our children have a structure in place at school. Routines, timetables are really clear, but that doesn't mean that changes can't be made. It's really important that our children learn to adapt to those changes. We know in everyday life something happens. We can't go out on that playground today because it's too frosty. So what are we going to do? And it's about preparing our children for those changes, those whoops moments. Or we can't have drumming today because the drumming teacher's poorly. How do we do that? How do we support them with those structures and routines? And again, sharing that with our families at home. They'll want to take them out to the shops, to go to different parks. Sometimes you'll find that, oh, we can't go down that road today, it's closed. How do we prepare our children for those things that happen? So structure is really important. The next one is our positive approaches and expectations. So being positive. We have such high expectations of our children. Every day is a brand new day. So whatever happened yesterday, today is a new day. And it's really important that those positive approaches can be seen within the classroom and are really apparent to everybody and are shared. So it's about talking about what we're doing today, sharing that information with our staff teams so they know what to expect. We're going to change something from yesterday. That didn't quite work, but we've got this new idea today that we're going to go with. Getting your team on board with that and listening to one another. When we think about positive approaches and expectations, we think immediately about our positive support plans and our behaviour plans of how we support those children. All our children need support at different levels. And it's really important that as a team, we talk about that support and what that looks like. I want to sort of add into that as well a little bit about talking about our children as well. Because although, as Sarah said, lots of our children are pre-verbal, it doesn't mean they don't understand what we're saying about them or to them. So if we are having a discussion with staff about a child, it's really important. Is it appropriate to have it with the child there, or do we need to have it later on in the day? And that can be also important for when you share things with parents at the end of the day. Do you want the child to be involved in that? Sometimes, yes, it's important for the child to be involved. Sometimes you'll want to have that quiet word with a parent and be talking about what's happened and what's going to change, what you're going to put in place to support them. The next bit looks at empathy and really understanding what motivates and what interests the children. But also what frightens them, what makes them anxious or distressed, and trying to have a really good understanding of that. I don't know if any of you have seen on YouTube, there's some great clips from Mel Baggs, American blogger, and it really gives you an insight into her world as an autistic person, and allows you to sort of understand and respect those different experiences that maybe an autistic person has. So definitely have a look. Google Mel Baggs YouTube, and there's lots on there to look at. Our staff looked at it recently and it really blew their mind, and it promoted lots of conversation about understanding our children again, because although, yes, unique, we've been talking about this for a long time, we revisit it all the time, and we look at new ways of learning. So do have a look at that. The next one there we've got is low arousal. Initially when we looked at that, we had to look at our environment, our classrooms, our corridors. What do they look like? How overpowering might they be for somebody? And I liken it to recently, I don't know if you've all jumped on the 10% off at Morrison's. I'm an Asda shopper, but I've tried Morrison's. And because it's a new environment, I find it really overwhelming. I don't know where anything is. There's new stuff that jumps out at me. And I end up coming out of the shop with a load of stuff I didn't go in for. And then I've also forgotten a load of stuff. So I've been really overwhelmed with my new environment. And I think it's important for us to think about our children and how overwhelmed are they by the environment that we present to them in the classroom. Lots of our classrooms are really bright in mainstream and really interactive, and our foundation classes are, the ones I've been in are just wow, and I look at the displays and they're phenomenal, they're great. But for a small group of children, that will be so overwhelming for them. And so what we did here was we really stripped it back. So in some of our younger classes, there's very little stimulation, very little displays on the wall. It's very, very calm for them, so they can focus on their teacher, they can focus on the activity, on the resource that's brought out for them, that entices them in. Because so easily, if something's presented, a bouncing ball that flashes, but oh, I've seen something over there, their attention is immediately drawn. It's like when the lawnmower man turns up and suddenly you've got all your kids looking out the window, or it suddenly snows or it rains and you have to stop everything and go, okay, let's just appreciate the weather for a moment. So really looking at your environment, and especially at this time of the year when there's Christmas trees, there's lights around, it's changing. And it's not about just making environments really plain for children. It's important to introduce them to new things, to Christmas trees, to lights, because they'll see that when they go outside as well. But it's being aware and how they can be overstimulating for them, and how to support them at those times. The final one there is links. And it's really about, you know, making links between things. Everything's connected, and that's really, really important. And I know Ingrid's going to talk more about the links through the curriculum as well. The next bit there is behaviour is communication. So often people think about behaviour as bad behaviour, but we all have behaviour. Some of it's appropriate and some of it's not appropriate. So it's really thinking about what are our children trying to communicate. And the staff here spend every day thinking about what their children are trying to communicate. And just because you know one day what they're trying to communicate doesn't mean you'll know the next day what they're trying to communicate. They keep you on your toes. So we focus on positive behaviour support. And we really start by focusing on our values. So if you have a think right now, what values would a visitor see if they came into your classroom? Have a moment. Would they see respect, empathy, trust, teamwork, honesty, consistency? What would those values be? What would you want someone to come out of your classroom and say, ah, I saw this happening? So with our positive behaviour support, we always start with the positives. What's working well? What do the children enjoy? What motivates them? What are they enticed by? And we need to really do three things. We need to see it. So we need to understand their needs. We really need to observe what's going on. We need to feel it. We're feeling compassion for them in those moments. No one likes to be in crisis. And it's about us being compassionate and helping them. And we need to be it as well. We need to respond in a way that is suited to that moment and that child's needs. It might be different to the way we respond to that child over there. And that's absolutely fine. So here we've got connect before we correct. And at Oaklands, we've done a lot of work around this over the past year or so. Those connections are so very important. And the science of child development has proven time after time that connections between big people and children is one of the most important. So often you would think that though, you know, a child does something that's not appropriate and someone would go in and go, no, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing that. But first of all, we need to connect with them. We need to understand where they are. We need to try and get onto their level and understanding them. Children depend on adults for their ultimate experience and for being known and loved. So the three things that we need to look at there is contact, connection and closeness. How do we do that in our classrooms? What can we do to really connect with our pupils? Again, have a little think. You can jot some notes down or just jot the question down. What do you do that really connects with your pupils? And you might have classes of 30, 34 kids in there. And you think, connecting with each and every one of them is really difficult, but it's building those connections. First thing in the morning, some children will come in and want to tell you something about their day or about their morning or their breakfast or what happened last night, those connections. If you do break and lunchtime duties, sometimes just observing how they play and being a part of that, chatting, noticing what's going on. It's those connections. And you might spot things that you hadn't seen before. But also through your lessons, maybe in your art lesson, you're working with a group of children. Those little conversations that you hear that you can join in with can make those connections, and it can make those children feel really safe. They've got that connection with you. It's about giving children time and time is something, you know, what would you like for Christmas? A bit more time, please. You know, it's that magic thing that we'd really like more of, but it is about giving those children time. And it doesn't mean that you have to sit down with each and every one of them for a considerable amount of time. It's just those little bits of snippets of time where you can really take an interest in what they're doing. So over the last year, we've been looking at emotional regulation and also then zones of regulation. Some of you might be aware of those zones, the blue, green, yellow and red. Looking to from mutual regulation to self-regulation and how that's taught. So in the next slide, just shared there with you, this is what one of our behaviour support plans looks like. So as you can see, we always start off with the green zone, the positive of what the child is good at, what do they like doing, what do they enjoy, what are they really good at, what helps them to calm and relax. And then on the other side of it, what are the support strategies? So the left-hand side is the pupil, the right-hand side is the adults or equipment. What can support that child staying in that green zone? And again, the same with the yellow and the red zone. And they'll look different for different children, and they might have different support or coping strategies there. Our aim is to work with our children to support them into being able to self-regulate. But first of all, we need to show them how to regulate, what that looks like. And it's that classic thing with giving the toddler the time out, or sitting on the step, the thinking step, as some people call it, and then walking away from them. At that point, the toddler can feel rejected. But actually what we need to do, they're in that moment of they've done something really wrong, they're in crisis, and they need our connection, they need our support, they need us to sit with them to model that quiet thinking time, that relaxation, that connection, whatever it may be. And that's really, really important that we also allow that time with our pupils as well. What do they need from us? What do I need to change to support them? Is it the environment around me? Do I need to change that a little bit? Are there too many people involved in this? Do they need their calming activity? It might be a calm box and they can choose what they like. Do they need a massage? Do they need to go for a walk? What helps them? Do they need to run around a bit? So what helps them? So there we've got how do we write them? We start off by looking at that positives. Who is involved? All the class team are involved in writing these. Anyone who works with that individual pupil is involved. Parents are involved as well, because they might be able to feed in some things that maybe the child does at home, or they use at home that helps them to calm down. They might like a blanket over their heads. That, well, we've not had that before in school. We didn't have a blanket, but okay, let's try that. How regularly are these updated? They're updated as regularly as possible. So if the big incidents happen, and we think, actually, we need to go back to the plan because that didn't work, the plan didn't work. And that's fine for the plan not to work, but it's about reflecting on it and being able to move on. So some questions there I've got for you to sort of take away and have a think about, to ask yourself or your team or the year group teachers that you work with, the TAs that you work with, your staff. So what are the barriers for our children? So our children in this class or this nurture group, what are their barriers? And how do we go about removing those barriers? And that's what we really sort of need to look at. And how do we support our children to communicate at the time when they are in crisis? What visuals do we support them with to allow them to communicate with us? So on to the next one is nurturing, and this includes supporting purposeful struggle as well as offering meaningful challenges. So it is really important here that we make our children as independent as possible, and we have that high expectation. It's what our parents want. Our parents want our children, their children, to be independent. They want them to be able to get dressed and undressed, make a drink, make a snack, brush their teeth, go to the toilet, and so on. And so it's really important that purposeful struggle is there within the day. So maybe going to the sensory room, they can't take off their shoes or put their shoes on. If we suddenly fly in with, oh, let me do that for you, because it makes it quicker for me and we can get back to doing what we need to be doing, the children aren't learning. So sometimes you do have to factor in, and, you know, especially in foundation stage, is when it's PE time and you've got all those 30 kids trying to get changed for PE. It's so much easier to help them, because you think, oh, I've only got the hall for an hour and we've already used 20 minutes of it trying to get changed. But it's important, obviously, that they have that purposeful struggle, because hopefully, yes, you might only have a 20-minute PE lesson, but maybe by the end of the year, you get a much longer 40-minute PE lesson and they've learned that important skill. They're not always going to have an adult there to tie their shoelace or zip up their dress. How are we going to support them in learning to do that, learning that new skill? So that's all about, let's not overhelp, because our children can do so much. They just need that opportunity and that time to do that. Within nurturing as well, it's, you know, what do our pupils need to feel safe? So we've spoken about connections and relationships, and they need those to feel safe. They need to feel trust as well, and trust in those adults around them. We've spoken about routines being really important and reducing anxieties where possible, but also belonging. Our children need to feel like they belong in their peer group, in their school, in their class, in their nurture group, wherever it is. It's having that voice for them. Interaction and communication is the focus in all areas of the school and all our lessons. So I've just given you an example there. So from Okie Boost, which I'll talk about in a moment, to intensive interaction, to literacy, outdoor learning, PE, everywhere is communication and interaction. So for example, our Okie Boost is something that all classes do first thing in the morning. Most of our children come in on buses, a few in taxis, and then a few parent drop-offs as well. As you can imagine, on a bus, they might be on a bus with 9 other children. It might be quite busy. So when they come into school, they're not quite in the right headspace to sit down and work. We all know when we get to work, we need to do something. I always put the kettle on first. I tidy around my desk a little bit, switch my laptop in, make a coffee. So we need to give the children that chance, and Okie Boost is a time where it boosts them. So it's an activity that is presented to them that we know they like. So it might be one of their motivators, something they're really interested in class. They walk in and they can see those things around that they can quickly engage in. It might be they need a bit of time to just run up and down the classroom a little bit, backwards and forwards, because they just need to, they've been sat down for 40 minutes, up to an hour on a bus. They need to just sort of wriggle around a little bit. So that's our Okie Boost. It gets the mind and the body boosted. And then obviously within our interaction sessions, they will look different in different classes and depending on the needs of the children as well. But the focus there is around that communication and interaction. So our other areas here are quality, so purposeful learning and struggle, like I've already mentioned, and assessment of learning for learning. So we're able to assess what's being learnt really quickly, and as teachers, as TAs, you can do that very quickly. And then where do our children need to be next? Oh, I think they can be doing this next. We need to push them that little bit further. Having that discussion within pathways as well about how we're improving the quality of our teaching and really pushing our pupils. So it's all about, as you can see there, staff, parent support, governors, local community. So our staff CPD is so important for us. We have new members of staff all the time, but we also look at how we're improving our practice all the time. And I don't think you can ever get to the point where you go, yeah, I'm done with learning, I know everything. There's always something more that people want to learn. Is it about trauma and the effects on trauma on children? Is it about how to support those children with really intense stimming behaviours? What is it that staff need? And so we respond to that to create a CPD programme for them. Parent support and learning as well. It's really important that we share our learning with parents, and we also, when COVID's not around, give them the opportunity to come in and do learning sessions as well, coffee mornings and such like. I think one of the really valuable times that parents have found is when they're invited into a stay and play session, and they'll come into the child's class and they'll be taking part in a number of activities that maybe the child's been doing over the half term, and can really see different things that they do that they might not do at home, because it might be that they don't have those resources at home, or they don't respond in that way at home. But there's lots of parent support there as well. Governors play a key role as well, understanding and working with teachers and area of learning leads to understand how we're moving the school forward and our priorities. And also our local community. We've got really good links with the church, and them coming into us and us going to them, but also around the community when we have our special autism days as well, where we invite members in. So our last one there is engagement. And when I was thinking about this, it's really thinking about, you know, preparing those pupils for life, and giving those children an irresistible invitation to learn. You know, if I put a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper on your table and said, please could you write me a story, if anyone did that to me, I'd be like, oh my goodness, no, I can't. If you put me some characters on the table and created me a scene and some Play-Doh that I could create a setting for, that's more of an invitation to learn. You're going to get more out of me for that, from that. And so we play and we learn together. It's about staff modelling, not just here I'm presenting you with an activity, it's up to you what you do, but staff join in and staff play with that. Children will look and go, oh yeah, I could do that, and that's my turn now. So we've got our 4 key areas there: enthuse, engage, explore, inquire. And that's what we're really looking at within our lessons. The last bit there of preparing pupils for life, I just wanted to read you a quote from Carl Rogers around positive regard. So for a person to grow, they need an environment that provides them with genuineness, acceptance, and empathy. Without those relationships and healthy personalities will not develop as they should. Much like a tree will not grow without sunlight and water. So that kind of pulls it all together with our unique approach.
Sally, could I just jump in quickly, because there's a few questions that have come in.
Brilliant.
We've got a question from Stacey and Tom asking, how long does the Okie Boost session tend to last for in the mornings?
Okay, so our children sort of come in at varying times, sort of first thing in the morning, but we try and do the Okie Boost for the first 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And we've got a question from Tara saying, who do you invite into the school other than the church?
We've had different organisations. So if we have special days celebrating Diwali, we might have groups in to come and do dances for us. I'm just looking around. Chinese New Year, we had people that came in. So we do have special curriculum days as well, where we invite visitors into school to come and meet with the children. It might be, if we're doing work on people that help us, we might invite emergency services in. We've had the fire service come in as well. That's always a good one. Bring the fire truck, that'd be great. Those sorts of things.
Oh, thank you. And just one other one as well from Michelle, just saying that they are in a mainstream school and just asking what assessment tool you use at Oaklands. So she's given the example of P levels.
Okay, so so a couple of years ago we changed our assessment tool. So we use an online system that we've created. So we input the statements using P levels, the AET framework, foundation stage. So we've drawn it into from lots of different places to create our own assessment tool. Vicky is the person to talk to about that. So if people do want to know more, then they can email and she can share that with them. That would be great.
Thanks so much. That's all the questions for now, but I might jump in again later if there's any more. I hope that's okay.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Ingrid.
Good morning. I'm Ingrid Spencer. Nice to see everybody. I'm going to talk about our evolving curriculum because we believe, like Mary Mike, that the curriculum is never finished and that you need to respond to what's in front of you. Also, our cohort is changing all of the time. So we've got increasingly complex learners coming to us. We've got 3 pathways, which is one of the first things that we did as a leadership team when we started together in January 2018, was recognise that the 2 pathways weren't sufficiently defined, that there was much more complexity amongst our children, and so 3 pathways better allowed us to create bespoke curriculums for those children. But over time, our children are becoming more and more complex, and so we may, in a couple of years' time, when we have an expansion and we have 32 more children, we may end up with 4 pathways possibly, so that we can have an even finer grained approach to the children based on their cognitive delay, their various skills. So it will always be evolving, I think. So in 2018-19, we defined the 3rd pathway, and we looked at how we were going to differentiate out the pathway. So what were the core learning strategies that we'll be using for each? What were the characteristics of the children to make sure the children were in the right place and would get the right diet of learning? In the past, the school had been adapting the international primary curriculum because they quite liked the units, but it just wasn't really working for staff. It was too mainstream focused. Some of the things weren't very relevant. It just wasn't right. And so we did a piece of work together, myself as curriculum lead, talking to the teachers about what they thought would work better, things that were good about their old resources. And we decided that we wanted to come up with a thematic plan. So we've got 6 topics every year. We've got a 3-year cycle, and we've tried to make sure there's links between them. So the different strands, life cycles in year 1 has a direct relation to animal families in year 3. Because our children aren't taught in key stages, they're taught by the type of learner that they are, their developmental stage. We can have some classes in Willow where we've got lots of year 6s, 5s and 4s, but cognitively they're working within the early years framework in terms of their cognitive and communicative ability. And they may come to us as a year 1, stay with us until year 6, and they'll always be a Willow child, because that's the step they're making progress all the time, but the progress is very, very small. We call them micro steps of progress. So we can celebrate every step, but so we can really have a very deep focus on what those skills are and build them bit by bit, tiny brick by tiny brick. And so it's important that we have new information and new topics each year, but that there's a really clear link between them, so that there's that progression over time, and that children are having lots of opportunities to revisit core learning. So we have shared planning in this thematic approach, and we got rid of the IPC. We're very keen here on catchphrases, because that we're a big staff team. There's a lot of part-timers. It's incredibly busy here all of the time, and we need things that people can really hold on to remember. And so 2018-19 was irresistible invitations to learn. Some of our children are quite hard to reach, so we needed to make sure that they were enticed all of the time. How do we, if we're not enticing them, we're not engaging them, they're not building their attention. And so that was a huge thing that we focused on in that year. So we were trying to learn from really good early years practice, create more opportunities for continuous provision style learning, although our building doesn't really help us with that. It's a mainstream building. It was never designed for our sorts of children, so we struggle a bit for outside space, but to do as much as possible to have that really fantastic high quality early years practice style work for 2 of our pathways. And our chestnut children, then we wanted to look at what would be irresistible to them, and that was to work with their interests. So we do lots of hands-on science, lots of experimental work, but also stretch their tolerance for whole class teaching. So if you saw a chestnut class with 10 children, it would look a lot more like mainstream because of the way that they sit, the way that they work together. And they were the first group of children that we introduced Mastery Maths with in 2019-20. So that was a big sign of we wanted to differentiate our pathways more. We wanted to make sure that there was a genuine sense of progression, and that our children in Chestnut were being really well stretched. There are 3 or 4 children that we would like to support back into some form of mainstream education when they go to secondary school. So it's really important that we were drawing on the best things within the national curriculum, making that learning relevant to them, and being really clear what the essential learning was. So in 2019-20, we coined this phrase, the inside-outside curriculum. And that works on lots of different levels. So we've got the child, our Willow children are very egocentric. They're at that very strongly personally focused stage of development. So everything needs to be within their sphere of the self. Everything needs to be relevant to them. And then when we get to Cherry, they've got some awareness of other people, increasing awareness of other people. They're beginning to develop interaction skills, beginning to need support and be able to access friendships and to think about a world beyond the self. And so that's the next level. And then Chestnut children, they are in the world, and we want them to be part of doing community projects, being out and about, thinking about how they can interact with the outside world. So that's part of that inside to the outside in terms of the individual. And then bringing in as much of the outside world as we can by having people on site from our local community, by getting children out and about as much as possible. So we developed units of work which were based around maybe 8 weeks of going to the library or 8 weeks of going to the park, because for some of our children, just managing the sensory overload of getting to the park is quite a big thing. We can't go once, we need to go at the same time every week and go to the same equipment and travel on the same route. And by the end of that 8 weeks, the children are playing and interacting and their anxieties have been managed, and they're able to really get a lot out of that. A lot of parents have really loved the way that we've treated going to the park as a unit of learning, because it's enabled them to take the children to the park and have a really pleasant time with the rest of their siblings. That's really valuable. For our Chestnut children, we'd be thinking about them going to the local shops and planning and buying the ingredients for their cookery lesson. So that it's a higher order of complexity, because they're children who can cope with that high level of complexity. So that's the inside outside. It's literally the self and how that goes forward, depending on which pathway you're in, but also that how much we bring the outside in and we prepare our children for the outside world. And that's when we came up with this idea of purposeful struggle. We've got a lot of staff who've been here a long time when the school wasn't for autistic pupils as it is now. That's been a journey over the last 8 years. And when some of our staff started, it was for children who'd never get a special school place now, because their learning needs wouldn't be considered to be severe enough, significant enough. And they've also had to go on a journey of change, because they're used to a different way of working. So building their awareness of the specialness of autism as a special need, and that care means struggle, not I'm helping you because you're my little one and I'm going to look after you. I think in special schools, even more than in primary schools in general, there's that people do it because they want to care for children, and sometimes that care is slightly debilitating. So we want to make sure that there's no opportunity for children to learn helplessness. That purposeful struggle is that little phrase that's been hugely helpful in our staff standing back and letting children struggle, letting children learn, and so therefore build their independence. And it's also when we came up with our connect before you correct as a way of thinking about our behaviour. And then this year, we have had what we call a connection and community curriculum to begin the autumn term. We didn't like the term recovery. We thought it sounded medical and a bit miserable. We want to be much more positive. And so we focus very clearly on this reconnecting our children to the school, reconnecting staff who may not have been in school during lockdown, making sure children could put together the pieces of learning, and that we felt like a community together, working with families, working with our externals to make that work. And we stripped back some of the things in our busy timetables to make sure there were extended sensory breaks, more time for reflection, but it was very flexible. We found that our Chestnut children were really keen to get back into learning, and that we actually stopped doing our connection and community curriculum within about 4 weeks for them, because they were chomping at the bit to really stretch their brains and learn. Some Willow classes, those children have taken longer to settle back into school, and so this there's a much heavier focus on these sensory breaks and lots of time for them to do intensive interaction and play interaction. We are now at the point at which we've had 2 years of our curriculum that we've got our full set of topics, our 18 topics, and that we can start to think about how we pull all those different threads together into the proper tapestry. So whilst it will never be the curriculum will never be finished, we're much closer at getting away from gallimaufry, as Mary Mark says, to coherence. And we're putting together what we're going to call a directory, because we want staff to see that there's a whole series of strategies that are you can pick and mix from to suit different children, that we have the overarching architecture of the curriculum, but all of those things fit together in a way that can be quite intuitive. We also want a physical directory, like a great big kind of phone book type thing, of all of our techniques, all of our strategies, all of our curriculum maps, that whole tapestry together, because I think that would be a really useful thing to be able to share with externals. We've started to sum up our particular strategies like attention autism, and we've got a format now that we've worked out that outlines where it comes from, what the research base for it is, how the things work, who's an expert in the school. And again, that'll be a kind of shop window, as we've talked about, this outward facingness. It's a shop window then that other practitioners can look and think, oh, I want to learn about that. Well, that person's a good person to talk to, and we can create some community across schools with that. And the really important, the thing that staff are understanding even more as we've evolved together, and the culture's changed in terms of how thinking around teaching and learning has developed since Sarah and I started as a sort of new leadership team, is that we want learning to be narrow but deep, and that it has to be reflexive. There must be enough time to consolidate skills and to revisit skills in order for it to be truly learned. So all of that takes time.
Ingrid,
So,
could I just jump in quickly, because there's been a few questions in the chat. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. We've had one from Bill saying, have you incorporated the engagement scales into the Autism Education Trust strands?
What we've done with our both curriculum and we revised our curriculum at the same time as we revised our assessment system. So we bought in a package called Solar, and it had pre-populated statements, which were a mix of P levels and other bits that Solar themselves had put in. But we realised that if we were going to have a bespoke curriculum, we had to have bespoke assessment objectives. So we've taken them from lots of different places. The engagement model has been woven through parts of that and has influenced our skills progression map, which is absolute micro steps from the very earliest. So for example, in maths, the very earliest number-like thinking and mathematical-like thinking, from sorting into categories or recognising that things have different properties, all the way up to year 2 national curriculum maths. So you can imagine that's quite even on its own, it's quite a big document. There's sort of micro steps. We have included them in those, and we will be, Vicky is trained as an engagement model trainer, and we'll be going out to support schools and the local authority to incorporate it, and we will report on it in the summer. So it's part of that whole thinking, but it's not a separate strand.
Thank you. And we've got another question, a question from Claire as well, just saying, is there any information on Mastering Maths that could maybe be passed on? I don't know if there's anywhere you could sort of point her to.
I can point you to
Off the
some
top of your head.
documents, but if you email me, I can send you some of our work on that.
Thank you, that's very kind. And just one final one as well from Victoria, just asking how children move up or down pathways.
It depends, because although we've got our shared themes and we've got shared planning, there's also a really high level of differentiation for individuals. It's based on an accumulation of all of our assessment of children. So in Willow, most of our children, unless they're very clearly verbal, go straight into the Willow pathway, and then there'll be a bit of movement. We've already got, by now, 3 children who next year will definitely be cherry children, because they're at the point of speaking, they're at the point of developing vocalizations, as well as good signing. Quite clearly, the way that they interact with other children shows that they've got those cherry characteristics. So because we've defined our pathways quite clearly, we can see that already they'll be absolutely fine. They'll make loads of progress in their classrooms they're in now, but they definitely will want more challenge next year. We change a few children during the year if it becomes really obvious that they're in the wrong pathway, so that they can be better supported. But it's that constant discussion that we have as a whole team about where children are placed, children very rarely move down, because we've got so much evidence about them that the pathways are so distinctive. We can usually place them really well once they've been with us for a year.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And there's actually just been one more question that came in from Benedicta, just saying how are you using EHCP targets for each student in the framework that you've created?
The EHCP outcomes are quite large very often, so we address them through small steps. So we know what small steps we'll need to be able to meet them. We've worked with our local authority, so although it says on the document by the end of key stage whatever, we don't really, that's not what we're doing. We're setting them for a year, so we're trying to break them down to be more manageable, because we found that there's a real variance in how well they're written when they come to us, and sometimes they're just enormous, they're completely unachievable. So we are making them for a year, so we're breaking them down into more detail, and every child has that as part of their profile of needs. But for some of them, they are the sort of thing that takes 2 or 3 years to develop. So in our assessment year to year and month to month, we've got the smaller steps that work with them. For remote learning to send home for children, if they have to isolate, we have used their EHCP outcomes, because we want to support parents to be able to work on some of those things at home. So we've sent resources and more learning materials that go along with those, so that parents can be contributing to achieving outcomes in that way, because we used to do that through the EHCP reports. We said this is what you could do at home for this, but now we've consolidated that into one document, which we think is a much better way of doing it. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I think that's all for questions for now, but thank you so much for answering them. That's really helpful.
So we have our 6 areas of learning. I'll give a detail of that in a moment, and SMHC and PSHE are embedded throughout those things, as well as some discrete lessons on those. Sally talked about Okie Boost already. We have spinny sessions, which was what was Forest School, but like most primary schools, we're not spending 2 hours in our woodland area, which is tiny, but still really precious. So we've renamed them as spinny sessions, and we've made sure that we have identified really clearly the core skills that can be developed by that sort of outside exploratory learning, so that those sessions are as purposeful as possible. But again, we've got this reflexive spine, so that skills are being revisited and able to be consolidated. We now put a lot more emphasis on cookery this year. One of the benefits of lockdown was a team of staff worked on a really phenomenal cookery progressive skills cookery curriculum, and we're getting children to develop knife skills, all sorts of things that people were a bit afraid of before. Really high quality, really challenging, but really fantastic cookery curriculum, which is differentiated by the 3 pathways. We have PE every day, effectively, because what we call outdoor learning is what you would call break time, but the first 15 minutes of it is directly taught games and play interaction, because our children need that. They need that direct modelling of play skills. We also teach life skills, and they're bespoke to pathways. Snack time is it's not just kids having snack, it's they use PECs, they are serving each other, they're developing communal eating skills, they're tolerating each other in the same space. Some children bring their own snacks from home, so the children have got to tolerate the smell of something they don't like. Lots of our children are very sensorily challenged, lots of sensory processing difficulties, particularly around food. And so that is it might look on the outside like, oh, they're all just having a snack. But actually there are there's huge amounts of learning embedded in those sessions. So really, our children have about 15 minutes without being taught anything all day. That's their only sort of free play time in their outdoor learning. And even their half an hour after eating their lunch, as part of their lunch hour, we've got staff directing and supporting and leading learning all of the time. So they barely get a break, our kids. They're cramming that learning in. So there's discrete maths and literacy sessions. We are developing our RSC for the summer. We've got a scheme called So Safe that we work with, which is designed for children with moderate learning difficulties, and we're trying to make sure that we can find a version of it that will work with our Willow children. Really important, our children are particularly vulnerable, and so it's really important that they understand public-private, that they've got a sense of self-advocacy, that they can look after themselves. So that's a very complex thing to work through. We're we don't want to rush that. We're spending a lot of time to make sure it's right. And we are developing a vegetable garden in what was a memorial garden, which has just become not fit for purpose. So we're ripping that out, and we're going to develop a growing area so that we can expand our outdoor learning, because we find our children that experiential natural learning is so beneficial for so many of our children. So that's something that we're expanding on. So these are our areas of learning. When it says OPAL, that's our Oaklands Pathways Assessment of Learning. We formally assess 4 areas: my talking, my thinking, which is everything to do with literacy, cognition, sensory development. My life, my community is preparation for adult life, work skills, life skills, PSHE and personal development. My movement is fine and gross motor skills and PE. Our Chestnut children are being assessed against national curriculum levels within that, because they're so brilliant at doing games. And then my maths, which goes from, as I said, math-like thinking and being, up to international curriculum formally assessed mathematics. Then we have my creativity, which is everything to do with art and design and music and performance. And then we have my world, which is where you'll find RE, geography, history, and a lot of science elements are put in there. For our Willow, these areas are almost like the glitter that's sprinkled on the trifle of their diet, which is very structured. For Chestnuts, there's a lot more formal content and learning. Oh, next one. So ensuring a high quality of education. As myself and the pathway leaders, we work on long-term topic plans to make sure that there is sufficient challenge within a unit. So if it's a summer 1 unit, it needs to be harder, in however you construe that, than obviously autumn 1, because we need to make sure that there's more challenge for children. So over the year it's being developed, and are the pathways sufficiently distinct? How are we really clear what it is we want children to learn? How will we know that they've learned it? How will they consolidate it? And we talk about green eggs and ham. If the child's only learn it if they can do it on a plane, on a train, if they can do it in a car, if they can do it at the bar. So how do we give them lots of opportunities to show that they can generalise? Because generalisation is something that can be particularly difficult for autistic people. So we've got to give them all of those opportunities to green eggs and ham it and be able to really show their skills. Pathway teams then work together, and they separate out parts of the curriculum, and they plan their much more detailed and really well resourced medium-term plans. And then within that, then class teachers can choose what they think from that will really suit their own children, knowing on their likes and motivators, and they shape their own weekly plans. And each of the pathways has a very distinct structure to the day. Willow is our most highly structured. Every sort of 10 minutes of the day has got a function and a very clear sort of follow through, because our children learn so well by repetition, and because of their anxiety, that very clear structure then allows them to relax enough to really access their learning and find learning fun. So that's their diet is incredibly structured, and the topic is a flavouring. Our areas of learning are led by a pair of teachers, and we've deliberately done that because we want them to be able to support each other, share their learning. We want them to develop their subject advocacy. We're really keen that the areas of learning should begin by next year. We hope to be this year, but obviously we're not. COVID means that we can't work in the same collaborative ways that we wanted. The area of learning teams will start leading what they think CPD should be in school, that they'll start bidding for money, time, resources, and that they will really take on the curriculum and fight for their area of learning. And so that's why we've put in cross-pathway AOL teams. The best practice for autistic pupils requires people to be very highly skilled. I visited a fantastic school called St Anne's in Ealing, and the head teacher who's been there forever, it's a really inspirational woman, and she said a brilliant thing. These children de-skill us all every day, and the complexity of our children and the way that they develop, they're constantly surprising. It's a really astonishing place to work, but you have to have a very open mind, and you have to have a lot of resilience as a practitioner, and be always willing to learn. So one of the things that we've been doing since we started a leadership team is really developing a culture of high challenge, low threat, of seeing ourselves always as learners, and that we're in it with the children. We've all got all have our feet in the gutter, but we're all looking at the stars. So we invest a lot in CPD. Every staff member has CPD fortnightly. Teachers have it weekly because they have weekly meetings. But they include things like planning and moderation. Obviously, you can't keep putting into people without letting them assimilate that themselves. And so planning and moderation meetings are part of that CPD for teachers, that we work together, we share our knowledge. We've also invested in relevant research journals and given staff access to those. And we have different strands within our CPD which serve different functions and link to our school improvement plan. And so we've got a mixed delivery model. Some things will be done in classrooms, some things will be done in pathways, some things will be done by going home early and whenever you feel like over a 2-week period, accessing a particular resource online and doing some individual reflection. And then when we are able to, getting everybody together, because sometimes that's the best way to be norming and storming and sharing all your views. And we have had a radical change to the school day. We, in recognition of how much learning our children do and how little time they're actually not learning, we decided the day was too long. It was tiring for some of our children. They're travelling increasing distances, but also our TAs were leaving at 3:15 when children left, and there was no time for sharing that knowledge and collaboration. So we went to the governors, who accepted our desire to change, and so on. Our school day now is 8:45 to 2:30 for children. So we've got 45 minutes every day in theory. Now a lot of that is cleaning and getting resources ready for the next day, COVID-wise. But that we'd have that time together as teams so that we can always be learning, always be sharing, everybody's assessing. Because if you're a class teacher, you've got 4 members of staff, you're 20% of the staff team. And if you're not using the other 80% expertise, observations and understanding, we were losing a huge amount of knowledge. So we've changed the school day. We've got a lot more time for staff teams to be able to work together. And we've also created a distributed leadership structure, which has those area of learning teams across the bottom, which once we can recruit everybody to them, when we can all work together, I think will really revolutionise the way we work, so that we've got a much more bottom-up view of professional learning.
Ingrid, can I jump in again? Sorry, yeah. There's just been a few more questions coming in the chat. We've had a question from Benedicta saying, could you give us an example of how many My World sessions you have per week? And also if teachers are creating lesson plans for every area of learning under this?
People have a daily plan, although I'm trying to get people to go away from that actually and have a weekly plan, particularly where every day is so similar. I think they should just have a slot and then the kinds of resources and the focus learning each week. I think we've done lots of work on teacher workload, but I think that's still a last kind of gasp, that people are not over planning. I don't mean that sounds disrespectful. I just think there's probably not a need for that level of planning. They're not making daily plans for every session. We share that work out. So with the team, if there's a sensory story that is going to be used over a half term or a couple of them, then one member of staff might take responsibility for putting those things together. Another member of staff will take responsibility for the maths for that topic or the PE for that topic. And so all of those plans then go together and available for everybody. So there's lots of shared work that's made a massive difference to staff workload. We also have things like the spinny sessions, the cookery were planned in advance for everybody, and you literally just take that lesson off the shelf. Everything is there that you need, all of the resources are in place. So there are quite a few hours in the week where that learning is already defined for you, so you don't have to plan for that. We don't have, it's so very bespoke here. It's impossible for me to say how many hours are My World. Some topics are very My Worldy. Some topics are very My Talking, My Thinking literacy based. So this half term is called Let's Explore, and it's very science heavy. Lots of explorations, lots of work on forces. So we felt that forces was something we weren't doing. A lot of forces and properties, and so this is a very My Worldy topic. So within topic time, there's a lot of that. But when we come back in January, it's traditional tales. It will be very heavily skewed towards my creativity and My Talking, My Thinking literacy. So there'll be much less My World. But over the year, because of the way we've mapped everything, we know that there's sufficient coverage as in the terms that we've set up for what we think is appropriate for our pupils. So there's not a hard and fast rule. Some of that's not very helpful, is it?
Thank you so much. And there's a comment from Stacey and Tom as well, just asking, would there be any chance that you could share an example of your planning maybe?
I'm sure I can. Depending on what you want, whether you want medium-term plans or, because we've got so many levels of planning. So if they get in touch with me, Spencer at Oaklands, you'll get the email address, then just ask me and I can send you whatever we've got.
Thank you so much.
So CPD, we can't be together a lot of the time. We're trying to be mindful of people's anxieties. Leicester has never come out of lockdown. We were in tier 3 effectively before it was called anything. It's really a grind. I live in the city and it's miserable and we're really fed up with it all. So we're mindful that we need to be careful of people's well-being, but at the same time, some people who are having to isolate, their minds are whirring because it's so busy here. We're constantly thinking. So some people have been craving learning. So we've put together lots of different sorts of packages of learning for staff for CPD. Some staff are accessing Open University courses because they're wanting to spend that amount of time and it supports their well-being. Other people are getting our units of learning, which we've worked out to take an hour. It's based on the KWL model, and they've been really popular. So there's a suite of them at the moment, the behaviour and mental health units. We've done 4 of. We're going to develop them, lots of different ones, and staff can pick them up. They can have hard copies to write on their reflection sheets. It models the way of thinking. So you start with that pre-thinking. What do you want to know? Various resources that they can access. And they've been really popular. So we're really positive about that. And it means that staff have got a bit more sense of ownership. And for those who are having to isolate, they can do everything we send them, and that keeps them feeling connected. It does make a lot of admin work. I was trying to keep people's CPD records and it was hateful. So I've developed an online form which will drop into an Excel spreadsheet through, we've got a thing called WeDoc. So I'm hoping that will make it a bit more manageable.
Ingrid, just one other question, sorry, from Bill, if that's okay, very quickly. Yep. Just asking, have Ofsted commented on your shortened hours at all?
No, we haven't seen them since 2018, but I don't think they will, because actually there's no reason why they should. Children are still doing 27.5 hours of taught sessions, because actually we're never not teaching them, because they need such high levels of supervision. Even at lunchtime, the smallest ratio is 5:1. So they're always effectively being taught. So it's still 27.5 hours, which is more than Key Stage 3 and 4 children do. So there isn't an issue with that. I would feel very happy to defend that. The local authority have no issue with it, so I can't think there'll be a problem.
Thank you.
And I'm conscious that I've used up my time, haven't I? This is something that I think is really important. Wellbeing is massively important, and certainly as SLT we're all on our knees because we haven't closed at all, really. We had 5 days where we didn't have children apart from school holidays, because of the nature of our children, and that well-being is really important. So one of the things we're trying to get people to think about, and when we were doing appraisal targets, this was the idea of balance. So we give lots of service all of the time. These are the ways in which we want to be of service to the school, but we can't just keep filling that up. What do we put in the other side that will help us with self-care and self-development? So I think that's quite a powerful little visual that we've been using, which I think is really helpful. And so that's the end. Now, we are having a lively morning with children, so the head has had to leave the room. I'm very happy to take questions, but I realise we've got about 2 minutes, haven't we?
We do have a question that's come in just saying, do you have many typical PMLD or wheelchair sensory impaired learners? Our school has quite a mix of this and high need ASD.
No, we don't. We don't have any children with physical impairments. We have some that have medical conditions, but we have very much the way that the special schools in the city work. Over time, they've specialised. So we've got a school, the Alliance that we're part of for Challenge Partners, they're the school that has the PMLD children generally. So we don't.
Thank you. And a comment from Stacey and Tom, also just not a question, but just recommending the Simon Sinek TED Talk as well to people, just to flag that.
Brilliant. Yeah, really good.
And I think that's all the questions, unless there's anything else that's coming in, but I think that's all we've got. So much, a few thank yous coming in and people having to drop off the call now. So an enormous thank you to all of you for running that. I know, Ingrid, it's just you there at the moment, but please do pass on thanks.
I would really wish to be able to say goodbye to you, and
Yeah.
thank you for stopping by. We really like to talk about our school, and we're as she said, we'd be very keen to have you in school. We do a lot of outreach work. Before COVID, we had at least 2 people from 2 different schools in every single week. And it's something that we really enjoy. So please do come and see us when you can.